Good day, this is Terry Difazio, and you're watching Dial It Up. It's been almost a year since I've had this guest on, and it's always good to see health educator Ms. Amy Hornblas. How are you doing today, Amy?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Terry?
Doing well. It's good to see you. You realize it was August 13th or somewhere around there, August 16th or something, the last time you were here.
Mm-hmm. And now it's what, July 18th?
Yeah, it's been 11 months. It's been quite a while, but it's great to have you back, and you have a lot of good information for us, don't you?
Yes, I've been very busy. Very, very busy and productive.
So you recently did a series of lectures, correct?
Yeah, well, we did a one-day event, a forum, a public
Okay.
forum, we called it.
Okay.
Yeah, so as you know, I'm a breathing advocate since mask mandates came down into Vermont for students and employees, and since the health commissioner ordered, and the governor had a mask mandate back in 2020, I've been doing research into the known harms that masks cause and advocating for people's ability and right and need, basically, to breathe freely in order to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. And I've been going around the state and gathering evidence people are experiencing the harms and trying to educate people on the well-known harms and how we can prevent them. And over the winter, last winter, I submitted an information request to the Vermont Agency of Education. And I asked them to present any evidence they had at all that masks are safe for children.
And
Guess what they said?
I bet they didn't find it, did they?
They don't have any. And I already knew that because I've looked at the evidence. There is no evidence. In fact, it would be unethical to conduct such a study because we know how harmful restricting breathing is, especially for children.
You know how silly this got? I'll just interject something and let you get back on track. Mm-hmm. I would see high school band, a band room, and kids would have like holes in their masks.
Yeah.
Like how much good is this doing? And it's not doing any.
Right. Or making them play basketball with masks on, which they were over the winter of 2021, 2022. They were still playing basketball indoors with masks on.
Here at North Country, they were having soccer games and the players had to wear masks.
Right. Outside, all of this sort of stuff. And so we had an expert that we wanted to bring to the Agency of Education. Her name is Megan Mansell. And she has a very famous statement, a very famous, what I am hoping is going to become a very famous quote of hers. Every mask you have ever seen on a child is unregulated, untested, and unsafe with zero efficacy. That means we have no evidence they work, no way of fitting them properly, no medical clearance standards, zero. What are we doing, right? And so we wanted to bring Megan Mansell to the Agency of Education because schools in Vermont are still willing, able, and some of them still are, to mask children using special education laws. So I discovered that over the winter because I also submitted an information request to Newark School District because they are still masking students in Newark using special education laws, saying that this is a way to protect one student who has special needs. We're going to require masks of all the children in that class or classes and all the staff that come into contact with the student. Now, this is based on a letter from the U.S. Department of Education, which was sent to all the supervisory unions in the country a year ago. And it advised schools to use these special education laws to impose mask mandates. Well, Megan Mansell, it happens to be a former district education director over special populations integration. She understands proper PPE use, and she also understands how to comply with ADA, OSHA, IDEA, which these are the laws and the regulations that they're trying to use to implement masks, when in fact that is a total misuse of them. So the Agency of Education would not hear from Megan. the Agency of Education would barely hear from those of us who were asking them, well, what are you doing? We need to address this. It is their role, according to statute, to address this. So we decided to bring the information to the people. And I gathered some amazing angels. I cannot tell you, Terry, how wonderful the state is. We are filled with so many amazing and wonderful people at every level who understand this perfectly well. And they're worried about the kids. So funding came together, people came together. We brought these experts in from out of state. We also had local experts present. We had 2 medical providers presenting. We took a couple of breathing breaks to learn about the importance of breathing. We had 2 students present, one of them from your area here, about how they were treated in schools when they tried to defend their right to breathe.
I remember him, yes.
Yeah, and 2 business owners presented. One was right here from Newport, the Desautel's family.
Yep.
We actually gave the Desautel's family a Breathing Champions Award. And more. We had all kinds of great presenters, and all of this, thanks to Terry, can be seen on YouTube.
Yeah.
And we also have a Rumble and Odyssey page where people can see the different segments of the day. So you can just gather whatever information you want to gather from whichever presenter. We covered a lot of ground, but we wanted to bring all the information to the people so that when these mask mandates come back, which they still are in place in several workplace settings, especially medical settings, I still meet people who are required to wear masks at work, required to wear masks to access medical services, required to wear masks to go to school. And I was up at the State House all spring, and I can tell you they are ready to bring out the mask mandates again at the drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. And so if and when they do this, people need to be armed and prepared to have the confidence and courage, which all of our speakers have, the confidence and courage to stand up and say, no, this is not right. It is absolutely not right. There is no evidence that these are safe or effective. There is no such thing as protecting others with a mask. And our presenters clarified this very well.
Yeah, but unfortunately here in Vermont, you have what is called a supermajority by one party,
right?
And they'll do whatever they want. And even people that I know that are progressive, they don't like it either. They say it's gone too far.
Right. I mean, up at the State House, I did find more advocates, more allies, than people who disagreed. But you're right. There is this. The minority is ruling right now, very, very clearly. But this isn't. That's why I feel like breathing is a great place to start. Mm-hmm. To build on a firm ground of reality here.
Well, it was a known fact that as soon as the Biden administration got in office, they were going to mandate masks, vaccines, and vaccine passports.
Right, and so it's the Biden administration also was trying to turn this vaccine or mask policy, which OSHA has been pushing into medical settings through this COVID crisis. Biden wanted to expand this vaccine or mask policy, which means if you're not fully vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. They wanted to expand that to all workplace settings. Mm-hmm. And thanks to 2 of our presenters, Tammy Clark and Kristen Megan Kelly, who are OSHA experts, OSHA-trained experts, that was stopped. Yeah, there had to be a big grassroots effort to stop that, but they are constantly trying to implement it wherever they feel like they can push in the power. So right now, people who are visiting the White House and visiting President Biden, if you're not fully vaccinated, you have to wear a mask and socially distance to meet the president. Like say you're getting an award or something. So anywhere they have their authority, they're trying to push in with these mask mandates. And so I'm just trying to help people understand that actually the OSHA rules are written to protect us. Mm-hmm. Masks and PPE like that should be the last resort. And if we needed those kinds of things, we better make sure they work. I mean, if you're going to go into that room out there and there's some kind of airborne toxic chemical or gas that if you breathe it, it's so dangerous, right, that it's life-threatening. Would I send you in there with something that I think might work? Yeah. Right? If I sent you in there with something I think might work, is actually more dangerous than just being honest and just saying, well, what else can we do? Either don't go in there or let's better ventilate that room. Let's do all these other things first.
Yeah, and in my opinion, and you can tell me if you ran into this or not, this wasn't really about health. This was about compliance and control.
Right. And
we're going to see how many people we can force into compliance to see how we can control people. Right. And I'll give you an example. When you left the state and you came back, you were supposed to quarantine yourself for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, go back to the former Soviet Union. Okay? When you left your town, you had to tell your police department you were leaving and tell the police department, the town you were going, that you were there. So this sort of reeks of the same thing. I mean, what is your opinion on this?
It's definitely getting people used to just blind adherence to whatever you're being
compliance,
told.
yeah.
Compliance, right. And to more and more invasion of your body. I mean, you've got the testing. We had children being routinely tested in our schools. And again, the tests, the vaccines, and the masks, all three of those medical interventions that were implemented during COVID were only emergency use authorized. They are not officially authorized. They have never been evaluated for safety or effectiveness. And the reason why we called this forum, another reason we called this forum, the reason why we had it on May 12th was because on May 11th, the federal COVID emergency was scheduled to end. However, the federal government spelled right out that they planned to continue the emergency use authorization for the products. That includes tests, which we have zero evidence that they are effective or safe or what's in them, right? The vaccines and the masks. And so we decided that it was time, let's start with the first most obvious, easy to discuss subject, breathing, and interfering with breathing. And what does that do? We have mountains of evidence. It's a very simple thing to discuss if anybody simply looks at what the CDC actually says. And so we figured, let's start with the masks and let's start to assess. We need to have a cost-benefit analysis. I've been telling you that for 3 years. You've been letting me come in and talk to people. And that's wonderful, Terry, because we have to get the word out there that people need to have the confidence and courage that your instincts are correct. You need to breathe.
If anybody doesn't believe that this is a matter of compliance, I read just one half of the book, The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab, and if that doesn't scare you, nothing will. Because this was all about compliance and how to change. They don't want to use the word the New World Order, but that's exactly what it is. They have a different, I think it's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution is what he called it.
Right.
And this is all about compliance and getting you to do what they want.
And so the antidote,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I like to jump right to solutions, and that's what's kept me going these last 3 years. These have been some of the hardest years of my life, but also amazing abundance of blessings, especially over the past year. And I have to tell you, Terry, and I have to tell people watching, that when you speak the truth, when you serve others and serve for people, not what they say the greater good is, right, which is sacrifice yourself. No, for what is actually the truth and what is actually good for your neighbors. Doors open, angels arrive, help arrives, and you're happier and more at peace, and I've made more friends. I mean, this has just been it brought amazing abundance to me by doing this, by putting this cause first, by speaking the truth about something that people don't want to talk about. That's why the antidote is to have the courage and confidence. So what's been amazing about this forum was it also gave us another reason to push into these spaces, right? To start pushing into the mainstream media. And we did make some inroads in the mainstream media finally. We ran ads on several radio stations across the state. I got an interview on the morning drive up in Burlington, which was great. And we had positive callers calling in who agreed. I mean, really, everybody I talked to, because I've been tabling for 3 years around this subject, talking to Vermonters on the street, everywhere I go, and people get this. Most people understand this concept.
You're very lucky because somebody from the 802 Freedom Group was actually sandbagged by WCAX. She was supposed to give an interview, and they asked her totally different questions.
Yeah, but she handled it so well.
Yeah, she did,
Right.
but she didn't have any answers, so therefore
Right.
the woman that interviewed her started making fun of her. And I did write an email to them, and I told them that they were a bunch of lackeys.
But interestingly, Terry, since that interview, because I know what you're talking about, and that was back in 2020, right?
Yes, it was.
That's the last time I think they've touched this subject. The mainstream media will not touch this. We actually had a press conference the day before our forum. We had the keynote speaker, Dr. Christina Parks, who is a cellular and molecular biologist, came to the State House and we did a press conference in the Cedar Room, Terry, and it was a very busy day. It was like the day before the end of the the session, and everybody's buzzing around, and the governor had just had a press conference, and I had spoken with every member of the press for the weeks before that, because I was going there every week, and they all knew we were having the press conference. They all knew what time it was. They all knew how important it was. They even had heard about the subject before I even talked to them, so we were getting the word out. None of them showed up. Very amazing to me that that they don't dare touch this subject. And I'll tell you why. And there's a meta-analysis that just came out that totally agrees with me. So this is not just my opinion. The University of California, San Francisco, just conducted and released just a few days ago a meta-analysis of all the studies that the CDC has pertaining to masks. And guess what they found? They found what I found, and I put on my website a couple of years ago, that the level of evidence was low and the conclusions were drawn most often from unsupported data. And their final sentence was something along the lines of, this kind of makes you question every decision the CDC, every policy the CDC has. And what I found a few years ago when I looked into the CDC's evidence really heavily, and I was trying to figure out, none of this is peer reviewed. None of these are actually even studies. The choir study, the restaurant study that we heard so much about in 2020, they're not studies. They were like opinion pieces, basically, in the CDC's journal. Well, the CDC does not have a peer review process. They admit, and I had to dig to find this, but buried in there, they spell it right out. Their peer review process is to do it internally to make sure the science matches their policy. That the policy matches the science, that the only science they publish is the science that matches their policy. So guess what? They've got bupkis. I mean, they don't have anything. The only things they can publish are these really badly done, insinuate, if you interpret it this way, evidence. I mean, it really they have nothing to stand on.
A question that I always ask isn't it kind of funny, every 2 to 3 years we end up with a CDC labeled pandemic? Every 2 to 3 years we went from AIDS, we went to SARS, we went to MERS, we went to H1N1, we went to all of these things, and nobody quarantined or made us wear masks. And essentially COVID was just sort of like some of those, and when this one hit, I said to myself, this is becoming too convenient now. It's happening too often. And tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me the CDC isn't a health organization. It is a vaccine pusher. They're
deeply tied to pharmaceutical production.
They have some
sales.
23 patents that they make billions on every year. And I've noticed that one of my friends from Facebook was telling me that when we grew up, we had 3 or 4 vaccines, and now there's like 50. There's way too many vaccines out there.
Right. I mean, just that fact alone should make us scratch our heads. The problem is there is no review. And as we are seeing with this forum, there is no, mainstream allowing of the discussion. And so that's why we held the forum, and that's why I'm tabling at events all summer and into the fall. I will come to your Rotary Club, I will come to your library and present this information, answer questions, do demonstrations. We've done it where I can show you how much carbon dioxide is building up under that mask. Whatever it takes, we need to get the word out there because people did get scared. I mean, I think the reason why disease, these kinds of respiratory viruses, these kinds of invisible viruses, whether they're sexually transmitted like AIDS or whatever, they're invisible, right? None of us average street people can actually understand. We can't see the viruses. We're not able to assess the data firsthand ourselves. We have to rely on these other people and fear, right? Once you have this invisible contaminant that you don't understand how it works, you're relying on experts and you're scared. Perfect, right? I mean, now anything they say, right? I mean, I remember the toilet seat covers during the HIV and AIDS, epidemic when it first started. I was an HIV and AIDS educator back in the day, and we were trying to convince people that you couldn't get it from toilet seats and you couldn't get it from hugging, and no one believed us, Tara. So we're kind of right back there, to people thinking smoking is healthy and doctors advising it. I mean, when people say, well, how could this happen? I say, well, when hasn't it happened? I mean, look back just last year, the year before, 20 years, 100 years. It just keeps happening.
You want to remember that any bureaucracy like the CDC or other organizations, their sole purpose is to make themselves bigger. That is the whole purpose of a bureaucracy, and the CDC is very good at this. I mean, I don't even understand how they can look themselves in the mirror, other than to say, you know, we made more money today. But going back to COVID, a Chinese official has finally admitted that there was a lab over there and they were doing experiments. And I can't remember what his name was, but anyways, they're saying it may have been an accident. So they're now admitting that all this propaganda about, what was it, the wet markets?
Yeah, the bats and all that, yeah.
But they were, and I have the article, they were going to unleash this virus in a cave full of bats in China to see what happened, but it got loose first.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. We don't actually know. And the people in the the people who are only watching the mainstream actually have no awareness that things like this meta-analysis just came out, right? Things like, that the CDC, has no evidence. That the measures that we took to address COVID have actually caused more harm than COVID itself. I mean, we all predicted that, right? More starvation on the planet, more hunger, more, more from the lockdowns, more drug abuse. I mean, just the lockdowns themselves caused more death. But people who only listen to the mainstream are just completely unaware of this. I mean, they're just still marching along, waiting for the next thing to come along to do the same things again. So this is why this window that we're having right now, where everybody is sort of taking a breath and getting back together and hugging again. I mean, it's so great to see humanity rebound this whole winter, watching people come out. The last people who still hadn't come out were finally coming out this winter. And to see them get together with people and remember what they were missing. I mean, it's just been so beautiful. This is the time while we are not afraid, so that we can think clearly and have these conversations.
Well, you know what was so funny? I think it was the end of 2021, or maybe the end of 2022. In Britain, if you got together with more than so many people in your house, you actually got fined.
Yeah.
And they were doing that, and then Boris Johnson goes out and has a big party.
Right.
Well, that finally nail him. I mean, talk about hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And this tells you, and if this doesn't tell you that this was some sort of a scam,
Well, and it's interesting, though, how nobody actually lied that I could see. Not Dr. Levine, not the CDC. I mean, they all say it. You just have to be listening very carefully. I think we have to. I'm a big advocate of media literacy. That's what I used to do before this. I'm a health educator, and I'm very interested in the media and how it manipulates us and teaching us how to see through it. And so when the governor first made his mask mandate, I think this is really interesting. He said, nothing in this order or any other state health guidance shall require the use of a mask or cloth face covering when engaged in a strenuous activity, whether you're a child or adult with a medical or developmental condition or issue, or if you have difficulty breathing. So his original mask mandate in 2020 emphasized difficulty breathing. If you have difficulty breathing, take it off. If you're engaged in strenuous activity, Agency of Transportation staff, even in 2020, were not required to wear masks. Why? Because it was greatly acknowledged that you're in a hot environment, you're out there shoveling, right? How could we ask you to restrict your breathing? So I don't know if anyone else besides me noticed, but as you drove around during the construction zones in 2020, 2021, while all the other state employees had to wear masks, not the Agency of Transportation. Well, why did we not grant that same protection to the students who were playing basketball, to the people working in hot kitchens, to the people who are doing strenuous, personal care? I've worked in nursing homes. You're changing beds, you're lifting people, and you're wearing them, you're doing laundry in the laundry room. Those are very hot environments. And even today, I'm meeting nursing home staff who are still required to wear masks at work. And one of them that I was talking to, she has cancer. She's going through cancer treatments, and she has asthma. And she's working 10-hour shifts with a mask on today. So I'm saying, where's the governor? I did ask for a meeting with the governor, and I was supposed to have one, but they haven't scheduled it yet.
From what I recall from that era, at one time, Governor Scott said he would not require masks. And then when Mr. Zuckerman decided he was going to run and said, I will require them, Phil changed his mind. And all of a sudden, there were mask mandates because he knew Zuckerman would win on that one issue. So he flipped.
But interestingly, I've been having some good conversations with Zuckerman too over the past year. So this is just such an obvious thing. I think people need to have the confidence and courage. There is really nothing to be afraid of as far as talking about our need to breathe. In fact, Vermont law has a law on the books for strangulation, right? Strangulation, which is typically a domestic violence situation, typically, but it's an act of violence. We would all admit, right? How do you think the state defines strangulation? To impede the normal flow of breath by covering the mouth or nose. Doesn't define them at length. It doesn't matter if it was for a second. It doesn't matter what the reason, what good reason you had, anything. That's strangulation. And in fact, the education committees up at the legislature have been working on another statute that makes it unlawful restraint to restrict a student's breathing. Okay, so we have these laws on the books, right? But then somehow we think it's okay, that any reason at all would be a good reason. And then not only just for a short amount of time, but we're talking for hours and hours and months and years and years.
When you start mandating things like this, and even though they're not the law, and everybody else does them, it's a horrible thing to say, but this is borderline fascism and/or communism, and this is what you've got now.
And what's the antidote, right? Is that we find the sovereignty to protect ourselves, to protect our children, protect our elders, right, who are still having to face these when they go to medical appointments and things, to protect our coworkers, our staff. So that's why we honored employers. We actually had one, we had the Desautel family. Mike lost his UPS business here in Newport because
we were down there. A bunch of people from around the state. Yeah, we filmed that.
Yeah, so he spoke, and we gave his family an award for all of the legal struggles. He's still involved in a case with his daughter, with a school district here. So he got kind of the bad end of the stick, right? The stick from the state, and actually got brought to court, and now he's bringing the state to court. And then we also had Gail Brown, who owned Cold Hollow Cider Mill in Waterbury at the time during the whole lockdown and the reopening. And she did an amazing job explaining how allowing freedom amongst her staff and guests to choose whether they wore a mask or not, and not running her business out of fear, boosted them to the #1 tourist attraction in the state that year, above Ben and Jerry's. So,
Don't get me started on them now.
Right. Well, we want to reassure business owners. We want to reassure teachers and medical providers. You are on the side of the evidence when you stand up simply for people's right to breathe. And that's going to be the antidote to every concern you just voiced of where this could go from here.
I thank you very much. We're running out of time, but it has been great to hear from you again. And if you need to do this again, you just have to call.
Oh, right.
Because it's been almost a year. And I'm only going to do this show for very, very special events or people.
Oh.
And so if you need to do this again, you just give us a call. We are a resource for you.
Oh, thank you.
And I don't know what station is down in your area, but we can coordinate with them if you'd like.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, this show will go out on YouTube, and it will go out on the VMX.
Great.
So.
Oh, and if people want to find any of this, it's vtmasksurvey.com is the website.
I still have the template, and I still have that slide.
Oh, great. So we can put it right up there so people can write it down. You can find all the videos and everything.
It's right at the end. So this is Terry Difazio and my guest, Miss Amy Hornblas. We'll just tell you like we always do. If you don't like the questions, if you don't like the answers to what we've said here, don't bother asking us the questions because you're only going to get the truth. Have a good one. Bye now.